Hello fitness friends, we are back with a cool little video. I thought it would be fun to do a little video on assessment and kind of talk about how that works. I've had the opportunity to have a couple of different consultations, and we discussing assessment with some people, and people are kind of curious and interested. Well, what does this mean? You want me to do body fat percentage and all that kind of stuff? No, not necessarily. But I thought what would be kind of cool is we'll break down assessment, or how I do assessment, into like 3 buckets, and then just talk briefly about how about each individual piece and what that looks like, is for some feedback for you guys. And then ultimately, hopefully, some coaches out there can take this information, organize it for them. They can take it, and then it can help them in their coaching journey as well. So when I assess people, it's going to be done in three different buckets, or 3 different kind of sections, and they progress off of themselves like so. But this little kind of fun little saying is assess, don't guess, right? So if you're not assessing, if you don't know exactly where a client is on a spectrum of physical, athletic performance, health, longevity, whatever it is, if you don't know where they are on this spectrum, then we're just kind of like guessing and shooting in the dark, and we don't want to do that. Okay, so I want to know right where someone is, so that I can put the carrot right in front of that and then slowly progress them forward. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to look at is I'm going to typically assess people's structure. And what I'm looking for is range of motion in a joint or a tissue, okay, and balance or symmetry in movement, or left to right, or however the movement needs to be however it needs to be looked at. But I am looking at movement, how range of motion and how balance and symmetry influence movement. So really easily, what does this look like? So what am I looking at? Yes. And then what does this look like if I'm assessing someone? It might be some unilateral movement. It might be some reverse lunges. It might be some rear foot elevated split squat. It might be some single leg touchdowns. It might be single leg RDLs. It might be that when it comes to some single leg movement. For bilateral work, it might be, show me an air squat. Okay, I'll try to fix a little bit. Show me a couple more air squats. Look at what's breaking down. So that's structural stuff. Some other things that we might look at is I might have someone do like a scratch test, where we're looking at someone's shoulder blade and seeing how the shoulder blade is moving across the thoracic spine. We might have someone do straight leg test, just testing hamstring flexibility or posterior chain flexibility. All of those things are really important because they influence movement. So looking for restrictions in movement. That's what I'm looking for when it comes to structural faults. This can be brought on by surgeries and injuries and those kinds of things. So that's going to be the base. And then once we move ourselves forward, if we have a pretty good understanding of this here, then we'll move ourselves forward. Now understand that this also can kind of look in like a client's experience or training age. You might see a lot of faults here as you're testing and assessing, and then if that's the case, then we know that this is just going to be an absolute disaster later on. But so this is structural stuff. This is strength balance. And what does this look like? This looks like balance in push and pull. And I have H and V here, so that's horizontal and vertical. Push and pull ratios are good. A good example of this might be an inverted bodyweight row versus a push-up. Okay. Another example of this might be, this is vertical push-pull, might be dips to strict pull-ups. Okay. Over here we have hinge to squat. And the ratio here should be 1-to-1 for those that I had just mentioned. So strict pull-ups to dips should be 1-to-1, plus or minus a couple. Okay. Same thing with the inverted row and the push-ups. Then over here we have hinge versus the squat. So the hinge is a bending pattern, a deadlift, an RDL, a good morning. And then the squat is a squat, a front squat, back squat, that kind of stuff. And so what we're looking at here is if we're doing a deadlift versus squat, we're looking at 80%. We want the squat to be about 80% of the deadlift. For someone has a more novice training age, we're not going to put these guys through a 1 rep max in order to assess a hinge and a squat strength ratio, okay? We're going to probably do something with a little bit of a tempo, just slow them down, and we might do a 5, build to a heavy set of 5 for the squat, build to a heavy set of 5 for a deadlift, okay? Posterior to anterior. A good example of this might be plank to Sorensen hold test, right? We're looking at those ratios there. Hollow hold position, Superman position. So these are all, the goal is that many of these are even or relatively even, and that's different. So this hinge and squat is going to be about 80%. All these posterior and anterior, we actually want the posterior to be stronger than the anterior, but for most people, we find that the anterior is actually stronger than the posterior. Okay, the goal is to strengthen that. Push to pull, we always want to put more emphasis on pulling, more horizontal pulling in a program in general, but that's going to change based off of how someone tests, right? If someone tests really strong with pulling relative to pushing, great. We don't have to worry too much about that. But ultimately, if I have like a lot of competitors in my program or a lot of competitors that I'm working with, those competitors are going to have a lot of horizontal pulling. And now that's also relative to what the sport is also. So if it's a mixed modal sport, if it's CrossFit, some sort of functional fitness, they don't do a lot of horizontal pulling in general. So we're going to do a lot of horizontal pulling as a base of support for the program. But that also depends on how this person tests for strength balance. Okay. After that, we're going to test over here capacity. And this all depends on whatever, and it says that right, yeah, specific to the goal. Okay, so if the goal is this person wants to run a marathon, then how we test capacity is going to be very different than if someone was like, I just want to garden, do 40 minutes of gardening during the summertime. Like that's what's important to me. That's going to be, we're testing capacity very, very different. Okay. Or even if it's CrossFit. So we have marathon, we have gardening, and then we have CrossFit. Know that those things are very different. CrossFit, you're gonna need a very balanced approach to capacity. So you're gonna be testing. You're looking for 1 rep maxes. You're looking for gymnastics capability. You're looking for a whole bunch of different things. I'm going to shout out this shameless plug or shameless shout out to the sanctional scorecard that is on website, deanlieber.com. Ooh, I'm getting good at this stuff. deanlieber.com, free resources. Go to the sanctional scorecard if you're a CrossFitter. Check out all the kind of capacity markers. So that has a bunch of suggested markers for you if you want to compete in this thing for a sport, but also just a lot of like ratios and everything else. Okay. CrossFit, we're looking for balance and energy systems. We're looking for good volume. So you should be able to do in a 10-minute piece 70 to 80 plus chest to bar pull-ups in a workout. So that's actually called race volume. We have race speed. So what does that look like? That's going to be split time on a rower in order to be competitive in this sport, right? That's CrossFit stuff. If we're looking at gardening, then you want to create some sort of like 30-minute piece where someone's doing some farmer carries, maybe some biking, some stuff like that. Put that in a piece, and then you can test your clients with that. Or if you're looking at just gardening, maybe you want to test and do some energy systems testing. Just do 10-minute on the bike. That's a basic aerobic test just to see where people are at. Marathon race volume for that is going to be about 25%. So about 25% of a marathon, it's going to be about 7 miles, give or take. Don't send me messages about how that's not 25%. I understand that. But then if for testing capacity, someone who wants to run a marathon, have them run 7 miles. Yeah, have them run 7 miles. Look at that. Extract from that information what your race pace and split time and all that kind of stuff will be. But that's the volume that you want to start out with, and then you can kind of build from that 7 mile volume. But so quick recap on assessment. We're assessing right where the person is at. If there's a continuum, we want to know right where this person is on the continuum, and that might shift on this continuum based off of novice and advanced. That might shift based off of the thing that we test. But start with structure. We want to make sure that someone's shoulders are healthy and good before we just start having them do a whole bunch of pull-ups or whatever else. Make sure they have good range of motion in the hips, maybe good spinal flexion, all this other kind of stuff. Assess structure, assess movement. Then based off of that, take that movement and let's assess and test the balance and symmetry of push to pull, hinge to squat, posterior to anterior on the human organism. Then we start putting and redlining the human organism a little bit. Let's make this human organism perform relative to their goals, whatever that is, okay? So it's what energy system does that client need? Do they need to be anaerobic or aerobic? Chances are most of us need to be aerobic, really good in aerobic. What is the volume required for that goal? Is it farmer carries for 30 minutes, gardening, or is it chest to bar pull-ups in 10 minutes? We need 80 to 130 chest to bar pull-ups in a 10-minute piece in order to be competitive. That's the race pace volume. Or are we testing a marathon and we need to be able to do that whole volume for a marathon? Race speed, how fast, what's the turnover of that? If it's gardening, if it's life, the speed, the pace doesn't have to be super fast. If it's CrossFit competitive at a high level, it needs to have a fast turnover, whether it's rowing, whether it's kettlebell swings, whether it's handstand push-ups. There has to be a specific speed or pace that we're moving towards. Marathon gardening doesn't really matter. So this is kind of a basic outline of assessment, how I like to assess my clients. Then from there, after all of this information is gathered, then and only then is a program written. So that way we can attack whatever sort of imbalances, structural issues, capacity, lags, whatever there is. We can start moving that client in the right direction. Cool. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Questions, send us a message, Instagram, whatever else. I don't really care. Send us a message. Love back and forth, love dialogue. So if there's stuff that you want us to discuss, let us know, and we can talk about that. Cool? All right. Talk to you guys soon.